As always, this opening lecture is dedicated to our freshmen.
Such questions as, how shall I believe in the possibility that my mind could attain truth?
If we could but know where we are and whither we are tending, then we could better judge what to do and how to do it.
Welcome back to another episode of The College. On today's episode, we'll be having a wonderful conversation with Eric Baker. Enjoy. Awesome. So now that it's recording, I just want to say thank you again for joining. To start, I thought it'd be helpful, as always. Would you just be able to say your name and when you graduated?
Yeah, my name is Eric Baker. I just recently graduated this spring from St. John's in the Annapolis campus, and I'm originally from New York City.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but I thought today would be a really fun episode to hear from you, because, I mean, you've just recently graduated, and you graduated in times that are a little bit different than, you know, what So I thought it'd be cool to kind of talk about where is this education trying to lead a person? I'm not saying, you know, what I'm thinking about is at a regular university, you might have nursing or engineering or something along this nature where it's like almost a trade in some way. And that education is tailored to get you to become the best engineer, best nurse, best doctor, whatever, or best writer, something along those lines. But here I feel like we do things a little bit differently. So I thought that would be maybe just a fun place. But this is a typical question I usually ask a lot of people, and it's one to really get the audience to get to know you. Just what brought you to St. John's? What led you here?
Well, I'm glad you started off your question, bringing up your thoughts on the kind of education that prepares highly qualified individuals, because I don't want to knock that sort of experience. That being said, perhaps I'm biased as a Johnny. I don't think it's sufficient to merely produce a highly qualified individual. I'm going to bring up something from John Dewey, where he says, you know, or I'm going to pose it as a question instead. I'm going to steal it from John Dewey. Should an education prepare you for future living or for just living? It might sound like a very vague way to put it, but he seems to consider, and perhaps I, inspired by him or the culture, feel like the culture of St. John's, feel like it's about the process of living. And that being said, what I mean by that is we are learning. Our education is not preparation for a life. It is our life. These great books touch on fundamental themes, but it goes beyond that. Now, what brought me to St. John's was, you know, I came from an environment that was incredibly focused on being the best, incredibly focused on producing highly qualified individuals. And that's what happened. It was a very good program I went to prior to coming to St. John's. And I found it very disheartening. I found, you know, it was majority STEM oriented. And I felt like by the end of it, by the time I was a senior in high school, that, you know, I felt discouraged. I felt like an education couldn't offer me much because it was a matter of memorizing facts and or developing expertise that can be fostered individually, that can be fostered without the aid of an academic setting. And I really thought, you know, now's the time to be independent. I remember speaking to some of my teachers in humanities, and I said, okay, but, you know, there's a school named St. John's I'm interested in. What do you think of that? Given, you know, we've spoken for X amount of years, you know me a little bit. And I asked three teachers. I asked an English teacher, an art teacher, and a rhetoric teacher. And the rhetoric teacher said, no one in this school has heard of what liberal arts even means. They don't even know what that word means. They don't care. They just want to be the best. You go to St. John's, you're doing something no one else here cares about. And maybe that's worth it. So I thought about it. I asked the art teacher, what do you think of St. John's? She says, if you go there, you have to be a self-starter. That's the only thing. You are in charge of yourself. If you can do that, that is the place for you to live a very vivid and rich life for 4 years. Okay, I asked the English teacher, what should I do? And she said, I never heard this school. Why would you go here? You should go to St. Lawrence or something, if you want to study literature or something of that sort of composition. And I remember like reflecting on what all three of them said. And the English teacher was very pragmatic, I suppose. You want a name brand school, I guess, if you wanted to end up in a certain place. And I said, what you had said earlier, you want to be the best at X or Y. And they have a lot of great programs there in Lawrence. I love that school, but St. John's was a place where I could be independent. I could be free to make my own mistakes and learn from them in real time. And have an organic, active, and social education, not one where it's completely you're out for yourself. It is about winning. It is about victory. What kind of life is that? If education is our life, helps us live our lives, then why would I want to live a life where I'm trying to dominate other people? Do I want to work with other people? Isn't that what a democratic society ought to? And shouldn't we take some value from what the classroom lends itself to in being something like a democratic setting? I mean, not entirely, given the role of teacher, but St. John's, our tutors are a little more egalitarian, I would say. But yeah, that's a bit of a long answer to a couple of questions you posed.
I appreciated that. No, it's very insightful. And I thought something that you said, this whole self-starter thing and kind of being you here at St. John's, a person, they kind of create, no, I don't want to say create, but they carve their own path in this education. You spend 4 years fine tuning certain things that work and that don't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just was wondering if you could just say more about what it is or what being a self-starter looks like, right? Because I think a lot of people, at least I had this idea of what St. John's was before I came here. I'm like, oh, you sit around a table, you read books, and there's maybe a goal in each class, right? The goal is to understand this thing or that thing or what that person said, right? But I found it's a little bit different than that. I was wondering, what is this whole self-starter? Like, what is that exactly? And what does that look like in a St. John's education?
Well, before I get on to what I mean by self-starter, I want to preface again and bring up from what I said earlier, the social aspect of the education we undergo here at St. John's. And so, John Dewey will say, one is what pushed to grow the most, or most quality education is delivered when the student is put in a social setting, has to kind of rise to meet the challenge and kind of master and command himself in that setting. And so I want to really emphasize the way I look at things. We go through the program so quickly that it's not really a matter of mastering each and every individual text. Rather, rarely will you find someone getting caught up on every little thing we read. I think that would be to the detriment to a Johnny to think I have to understand every little thing as an end goal. I think it's helpful. I think it's healthy. I think it's great for a student. I think all students should really seek strongly to understand what they're reading. But we're not here to understand. I agree with what you said earlier. That's an expectation I think that is defeated. We're not here to understand. We're here to learn what that difference looks like is however you define it. What are you here to take away from your education? Is it merely aesthetic? Do you want to enjoy these books? Or are you really interested in a particular aspect, like say science or the philosophy of science? You want to read this and that book, you're always interested. It's great. But you also have to do music. Maybe you're not a music person. You have to do courses you're uncomfortable with. You have to do astronomy. And you may not be interested in astronomy genuinely, but you'll learn to, because you are in control of your own experience. And that's what I mean by self-starter. You define the terms of your individual experience here at St. John's. The tutor isn't going to tell you, do this and that. You have to tell yourself, I'm going to do the reading. I'm going to pay attention to how my fellow peers and my tutor or tutors, raise questions, work through text, and work with each other. I'm going to try to emulate that and do something that is also my own. In doing so, I get to not only define things that are discussed in these books on my own terms for myself, my own time and place, which is always a wonderful, wonderful experience, but I get to learn something that is valuable and will last longer than any piece of knowledge. I get to learn how to think. I get to learn how to direct myself and how to push myself consistently. These are qualities I think any teacher would be glad to see a student walk away with at any part of the academic experience, whether you're in high school or college or graduate. If you can walk away able to direct yourself, I think you'll be in a good spot.
That's well put. I agree. Recently, or most of my time, my early time here at St. John's, I really, and I don't think I'm uncommon when I'm about these feelings, but I felt as though the image that I had of this place and the reality of it were kind of two different things. Now, I'm not saying it's for better or for worse. I just think it was different, right?
Yeah, expectations got subverted a little bit.
Right. So I was like thinking, oh, how wonderful it would be to sit and read these texts and wrestle with these things and go to a classroom and speak about it. Although I had no idea, first time reading it, but I'm just going to give everything that I have, right? And honestly do those things. But that idea and that I had, when in practice, I found it to become, hard. It's very hard to like sit and speak about something that you really, I don't want to say you don't know, but first time reading it, you're not gonna, like, you may not have the best understanding or
absolutely
a working understanding to feel comfortable speaking in class. So I wonder, could you just speak a little bit more about the community aspect, right? The classroom setting. How's that worked, or how's that played for you, right? I feel like that your peers are the people you're going through this education with. But yeah, what is that, I don't know, peer-to-peer kind of system look like? What is, yeah.
Well, I guess I'll put it like this concerning the relevance of the social aspects of our education here at St. John's, the relevance of that to this sort of honesty that might be required or asked of us when we come to the classroom, given that we don't have weeks to master very difficult works. A week or a couple days. If you want to read ahead, please do. If you want to read multiple times, please do. But we are under time constraints, and that's very much acknowledged. And so when you say about honesty, I think it's really important, right? Because if you step into the classroom and you think you're going to fake it, you're getting caught. That's not what you're here for. You're in a room with a bunch of equals. Your professor does not call himself or herself or themselves professor. We are tutor. We all go by Mr. and Ms. or M. We're all on the same playing field. We all have the same thing in front of us. We all are not seeing the same thing. It is almost quasi-phenomenological, right? You put an object, some low-hanging fruit, everyone looks at the same thing. Perhaps it is a dancer, and everyone has a different frame of reference, a different perspective as to what event just occurred. That's useful. That's, I think, is the value of the social aspect of our education to the great difficulty of reading these texts and trying not to come in with assumptions, right? And you had said before, you had certain assumptions or expectations or opinions about St. John's. And they were just that, opinions. They were defeated by reality, by the process by which you learn more about this place over time and with people and learn their thoughts about it, come to think more of yourself for yourself. What I think about the program and the curriculum, et cetera, and the culture. If you come in with an assumption that you are not intending to defeat, you're just going to put it out there and hold on to it, I don't think you're necessarily engaging in the almost dialectical activity that we are so fortunate to enjoy here on the daily at St. John's, or if you're a St. John's student. You start with an assumption to see whether or not it stands. And you need other people to help you see what you are saying or asking, whether or not there's a bias, an assumption, or opinion there. For if you see those things for yourself, you may as well not worry about getting an education. It sounds like you're a perfectly aware human being. But I think the democratic setting that is provided for at St. John's really allows us to do away with posturing, to do away with poise, things that often find themselves getting in the way of a good conversation in a seminar setting. Not at St. John's, in any school, right? People want to show, present themselves a certain way. It's natural. It's almost considered polite for some people. Okay. That being said, is that helping anybody? Or would you asking an earnest question, I don't understand this, why X? Or how is Y working in such and such a way? These are genuine didactic questions that will help you get closer to actually understanding, working through a problem presented by a text, or furthering your line of exploration in your own private reading, in your own private life, or in the classroom. And so you need the social aspect to make St. John's and its program work. Because otherwise you get what I would call not education or learning, but the same sort of winning mentality I sought to avoid in coming to a place like here.
When we were speaking about this, one thing that never even crossed my mind to speak about, but I thought is kind of necessary right now is, one person could ask themselves, or someone looking at the college and saying, oh, this is a very interesting place. They do a lot of reading, do a lot of speaking.
Yeah.
What about grades? What about how are you marked? How's your progress marked? And I thought, this is a very small point that we both know we know about it. We've both gone through it, but that's DonRags, and how grades aren't necessarily the mark of how well you're doing in class, but rather you have a DonRag, which is where you sit in a classroom for about 10 minutes, and all of your tutors from every class that you have is sitting there, and they kind of tell you where your strong suits are.
They don't tell you though. They
They
don't even look
suggest.
at you.
Okay.
They don't speak to you. You are not in the room. You are a fly on the wall. That's an interesting pedagogical tweak we provide in the DonRag evaluation. It's not just strictly evaluation. You get to hear what other people think without being involved.
Mm.
And you get to, yeah.
No, go ahead.
You get to hear what other people think, whom you trust, right, with your education. You trust what they have to say and what they've thought about your performance. But you're not there to argue. In fact, you're there to take what they said, maybe with a grain of salt, or take it to heart, so you can direct yourself for the next semester. And you show them, right? So it's not them evaluating you at all. They don't evaluate you. They just have a conversation. You have to evaluate yourself and make changes that you think are relevant and helpful. Doesn't mean you have to follow exactly what your professors or tutors had suggested. You decide for yourself what's going to be helpful for you and for your peers. Most importantly, for yourself in improving as a student, as a thinker, as a person. There's a moral component there, I think. And so, this really goes back to being a self-starter. It's not about the grades. It's not the mark of a person's growth. You decide what the mark of your growth is. And if you don't learn how to do that now when you're young, well, I can't imagine what's like learning that when you're older.
I appreciate the slight difference, because I never even thought about it that way. I mean, my experiences with my DonRags, it was very much like you described it. You are just a fly on the wall, just listening to people, your tutors, speak. And they're speaking about you, which is kind of funny, but it is something that takes a little bit of adjusting. And it's not, for your first one, it's not comfortable, right? I was very lucky to have this wonderful tutor, and he told everyone, I had him for freshman language, and one class right before the end of the semester when DonRags were coming about. He said, hey, anything I'm going to say in your DonRag, one, should not be news, right? You should know all the things that I'm going to say, not because, or two, this is who you are, right? Like, if this is the type of person you're presenting in class, think about this, like, give it some thought before you walk in. And then when I was in my DonRag, he looked at me, like, before we started, he looked at me and smiled. And I remember that, really calming the nerves. And that was my first one. That was my introduction to what DonRags are. But I thought it was more interesting is how DonRags are throughout, different stages from freshman to senior year, because freshman, you have one DonRag each semester, where senior year, you don't have any.
Yeah. In fact, junior year, you have a choice of a conference. Now, for those who are uninitiated, so to speak, a conference is an opportunity you have junior year to, rather than hear what your tutors have to say about your performance and your development and growth throughout the past semester, you give them what you think, how you think you've done. You try to take a little independence, and then they respond to you. They say, well, I agree, but let me qualify that, or let me, and I really think it's a mark of the seeming maturity to take that on and say, I'm going to really evaluate myself. You've taught me. You all have taught me how to guide myself. I'm going to show you what I've learned insofar as that is concerned. In senior year, you have no Don Rags. You're independent. Your senior year seminar, unless you have a tutor who is new, will only have one tutor. For 3 years at St. John's, you have 2 tutors for your seminar. But senior year, you have 1, because the responsibility is shifted between teacher and student. Now, of course, we regard the teachers as equals to students, just as students are equal to teachers. That being said, of course, I'm going to listen to my teacher to some capacity. That's just the way these things go. But the responsibility is put on us, and we have to be willing to take that up and guide ourselves and mature ourselves with the aid of others, because we cannot see these things by ourselves. That's the value of having a Don Rag as practice, because I think it really prepares you for understanding how you fit into a certain social context in a really explicit, direct way you'll never get, I think, any other sort of setting. Usually, I don't think I've ever heard of a place. I mean, Oxbridge has their own Don program. You're meeting with an advisor once a week, and they assign essays or papers or projects, and they speak with you about your growth and development. But it's very different. Remind me where we were again. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to quickly interject about the markings of kind of progress throughout the year, right? It's no test. It's no 98, 87, 76. None of those numbers that will tell you out of 100%, how much you know, right? Because that's not really the point of what we're all doing, which it was just a small little thing. But then another thing that you were talking about, and something that I think is helpful to discuss further, is when things become hard, how do you handle it, right? The rigor of St. John's I think it's placed in a way. Let me back up.
No.
I really do think that St. John's is set up in a way to where it will break you down to build you back up into a better version of yourself, or a different version of yourself, right? Better is for you to determine. But what I mean by that is the things you read, they're hard. And I was just kind of wondering, first of all, it seems like 1, you have something to say, and I'd love to hear it. 2, I wanted to ask you, how do you handle the rigor of St. John's, especially in those times where, you really are failing to see the purpose? We're talking midway or almost at the end of first semester, or again, the end of second semester. You're fighting to get through those final weeks, and some of these readings are just like, what? I'm not understanding. How do you recenter yourself and remind you of these important qualities that we're all trying to work through?
Well, first thing I want to say, you used a funny and strong word, break. I want to qualify that real quick, just for our viewers who are interested in the college or unsure yet. Break away or break down your assumptions. Break away anything that is maybe faulty or unnecessary to you, and may develop something a little more substantive out of it, a little more mature. I know I'm being very vague with these words. I just want to keep things open-ended. But let's see. How do you deal with the rigor? Well, that's a good question. If you're talking about the rigor of reading by itself, I think it's a different story from the rigor of the classroom. And I'll just start with the rigor of reading. You have to learn. Well, you have to learn. You don't have to learn anything. At St. John's, either as Pano or as President Nelson, former President Nelson, had said, you can't lead someone by forcing them. And we don't force anyone to do anything. You are free to take, to quote a tutor of mine, who I'll leave my name, you're free to take these books as seriously or as frivolously as you please. I hope you take things seriously as a fellow student or former student. It's very fun. I hope you find a way to enjoy these texts, even if they are difficult. That's the challenge. That's the excitement for me, is, I feel like I don't understand. Well, why do I have to understand anything? Why do I have to have a big picture view or have some inclination to saying, this is the purpose of what I'm doing from the onset? Rather, I'm reading this book for the first time and it's notoriously difficult. And the subject of the, let's say, the history of philosophy, it is still well studied or something of that nature, and studied by very serious academics in a very different context and setting. Here we do that in a week as opposed to over the course of 4 to 10 years. And spending the kind of time with the book and doing this repeatedly and making this a leisurely and relaxing and enjoyable part of your day that anybody can enjoy. It doesn't matter who you were, it doesn't matter if you didn't like reading before you came here. There's a way you can learn to really enjoy and have fun with it because, it's a bit, not that it's a game, it's serious play, to quote you, Brad. It is serious play. And so dealing with the rigor of reading, I say, that my best advice, I don't like good advice because I only just graduated, what is that word? But take things one step at a time. And if you have a question you're confused, write it down in your margin, go back, and think through it and just take a second. People say so often, I don't get it. Everyone says that. But why don't you get it? You take another second. Breathe a little, look at it, take a break, come back to it. What did this sentence say? What did the sentence say before? What is this paragraph discussing? Can I translate that for myself? Can I bring things to my own terms, reduce it for a second, and then go back and expand what I just reduced in my mind so I can comprehend what I'm reading a little better? Can I make marks, notations, so when I'm in the moment, in the classroom, right? In the classroom, that's what I'm saying, it's a different kind of rigor. You're not coming prepared with a speech. You're not coming prepared with an idea of, well, you may have an idea of what you think you have read, but you're here to be open-minded when you step into the classroom. And it's a far more extemporaneous experience. And that's part of the challenge and rigor of St. John's classroom is the extemporaneous aspect of it, the off-the-cuff nature of our discussion. One in which if you prepare in a rather pedantic way, you might feel an advantage in some way, but you might be at a disadvantage in others in regards to having an organic and stimulating conversation, which you get out of it something you didn't know already. And so what I would say is to deal with the rigor of reading, to be short, is take things one step at a time, make it light and easy. It's just language. And there's meaning to it. Just take your time to figure out what that is. And if you run out of time, don't worry, you have all the time in the world. You have 4 years of your whole life, and you have a bunch of friends who are reading the same exact thing. But you don't understand it, ask a question. If not to yourself, to the book. If not to the book, to a friend. Even a non-friend, just a classmate who you don't really know. Everyone's interested, everyone's willing, and everyone's struggling. That's the awesome part. That's how you deal with it, Rick. You fall back on questions, you fall back on your peers, you fall back on yourself.
I found myself, especially this past year, junior year is notoriously known as just being a very difficult year. The material, but yeah, I remember this past year really not relying, but leaning on friends or even my core mates, and we would, when we were able to, because although campus was not open, many students did live around the Annapolis area. So the few of my core mates who were, we would get together and sit outside and try to read as much as we could together, because one could go their whole life, reading these texts and writing and thinking about them. And maybe you could say more about this, but I think the important part is not in the reading and thinking, which is all very important. But what St. John's does, and I think this is it's the community, it's the people that we have the conversations with. Now that is the biggest thing St. John's brings. These books you could go get wherever. Go to your local bookstore. You'll probably find one or few.
There are other great books programs, a few number. It's sometimes a compulsory part of one's education. You have to have the liberal arts core completed first. That being said, it is cutthroat. And what's so fascinating here is that St. John's, over the course of so many years, we've maintained and fostered and nurtured a culture, an attitude, which is infectious, which the freshmen, even now with, because of the pandemic, newer classes have come in, And they haven't been able to necessarily socialize, fraternize with the upperclassmen. As I say, it's been kind of hard, I think, to transmit culture from upperclassmen to underclassmen. Now, harder than it was when I was a freshman, just because less chances for social interaction because of the pandemic, because of distance learning. That being said, there's no other place. You said lean on. Now, I think there's a different, I'm not going to fault you for using that word. I want to make it clear for whoever's listening. I think there's a difference between a support network and a crutch. Here, you're not leaning on anybody. Here, you have the support of friends, of polity members. Isn't a friendly sort of love kind of necessary for a really happy society? I think we have a happy society here at St. John's because we had the opportunity not be afraid to say what's in our mind, be attacked. We're ready for any sort of critical discussion because that helps us grow and reflect on our own thoughts and thinking. But it's never, ever the intention of your peer to hurt you, nor is it yours to hurt your peer. We try to help each other. We try to recognize, not repair. Quote the poet Ocean Vuong, who in his workshop classes has 2 weeks where he says there's no criticism allowed in this class for 2 weeks, with the intention of making sure his students and himself are able to recognize how their peers think. And then they can help, because as Ocean says, recognition over repair. I think the same spirit applies to the conversation culture classes here at St. John's, and makes us dramatically different from any other program that is interested in these books or interested in fostering something of a.
That detail is important. It's not necessarily you are leaning on as a crutch. It is more as they are supporting you in your journey of this education.
And we're seeing each other.
Yeah.
We're seeing how my peers, how they think. And that's going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And me doing the same, well, I had to put myself out there. So they're putting enough faith in me and their peers to speak and ask questions and be vulnerable so they can grow. Shouldn't I do the same?
Right. Nas?
It's trust. Well, that's the beautiful part of this place. You can have a really hard education, a really good education, and you can have it in a trusting, generous environment.
Yeah. And then I was also going to add just how almost wonderful it is to see not only yourself grow, but to see your peers. It's something that freshman year, there's this attitude and this kind of energy, right? People are energized, people are ready to go and everything. And
they're excited.
Right. They're excited. And that's important. And I think everyone from freshmen to seniors are excited in some way. But I think when you get to the later years, you start to really see you start to reflect on where you were and where you have come to. And not only you don't do that for yourself, but you do that for your friends, for your other classmates. You're like, oh yeah, wow. I did want to ask, and this was kind of like the last big thing, and it's more of a personal thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
A personal question for you is, now that you have just graduated, when you look back to your freshman self and look back at other points in your St. John's career, like how have you seen yourself grow, if at all?
Tremendously. I don't recognize the person I was when I came here. I'm going to bring up a quote from the 10 injunctions. This is an Eastern classic. The 10 injunctions of King Tejo Wangyal from Korea, founded the Goryeo dynasty. And we just steal one word from him. Piece of advice for this sentence. He says, toil. That's a harsh word to translate, but toiling. All this toiling, all this hard work, all this sweating, blood, sweat, tears, laughter, etc., anything cliche you want to throw out there, all the experiences I had in college and at St. John's has just transformed me. I don't think the same way. I don't know what has changed, but I know that whatever comes, I'm going to be ready. And by that, I mean, is St. John's really helped me have faith in education, see the beauty of education. More importantly, as a writing assistant, when I was a senior and a little bit junior year, what I thought was so exciting about that job was seeing my friends, my peers, my colleagues, people I don't even know, my peers, seeing their thoughts develop as we're having conversation, having there be a concrete result, maybe that's a little instant gratification for me. I'll take that what I'm saying with a grain of salt. To see something concrete, a change happen overnight in the span of a couple seconds, just by what they said when pushed a little bit. The student, I mean, who's asking for help. And I've learned to cherish these little victories. Whenever you had brought up the example, let's say there's someone who was really passionately excited when they're a freshman. They're young or something. Maybe they're old, but they're young at heart. Oh. And maybe they're saying things that their peers don't think is necessarily relevant. Well, just as you say, perhaps that hypothetical student had grown such that their points are more poignant, I would hope that their peers who initially thought that the student wasn't necessarily being so focused, come to see the value of someone putting themselves out there, come to see the value of a person trying and making these small steps, and find that by seeing that person grow, I too know I can grow. I can have my own small victories. A small victory can just be a student is scared to speak because it can be nerve-wracking to speak in a room of intelligent people. But then you say your first word, your first sentence, your first question, your first comment. And people think it's beautiful because they just want to hear what you have to say. There are a lot of quiet kids here at St. John's, but even they are welcome because everyone is welcome to the table. It doesn't matter what you have to say. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you say it's relevant to what? How many conversations stay focused for an hour? How many, without a heavy hand, right? Our tutors are not heavy-handed. Without a heavy hand, how do you have a room of 10 to 20 people stay on topic for an hour or two? You can't. Conversation is fluid. It's organic. It moves. And at St. John's, because of that process, I feel like in the past 4 years, the way I've grown the most is grown as a fluid and adaptable person. More so that than I was before, because I was put, me and my peers as well, were put to the test to be flexible, fluid, accepting, open. Now, St. John's may provide something of a moral, holistic, or character building education, but it's not moralistic insofar as certain values are espoused and we're told to keep them. We would not read a certain work on ethics and say, adhere to this or else. We don't say that. That's not the moral we're trying to build. There's no doctrine or dogma being espoused here, like I said. The moralistic aspect of this education, the character building aspect of this education, is something that is fostered by the social aspect of our classrooms. And by engaging socially with our peers in an open and honest manner, I've been able to grow into an adult where I felt like I was a kid before. I felt I was very lost as a young person. But like our seal says, our motto, books and a balance make children into free adults. So I would hope that's what happened to me. Maybe I still have some way to go. I don't want to be so sophomoric in my self-gratification, but it's made me open. It's made me less rigid. I can't help but be thankful for that.
Yeah. That's something to really take to heart is, I haven't graduated yet, but I appreciate the words that you have to say, and I'm looking forward, I've seen tremendous progress since I was a freshman, and I still have time to go, so I can only, I only.
Remind me again, the first part of what you had said.
Yeah, no, what I was just thinking is you take things step by step. I really challenge people to take it small steps, slow down. That's what I've learned a lot in this past year being online is slow down.
You learned something you didn't know before because you didn't, well, in some sense, maybe you started with an assumption somewhere by picking a small point to focus to begin with of a point you're curious about or you're interested in learning more about, a question about. It could be a didactic question, how is this working? Could be a fundamental question, what is virtue? But either way, either way, you're able to dialectically engage in a conversation. I shouldn't use the word dialectical. You're able to engage in a conversation with the text. Now you do it in the focused manner that your tutor and your preceptorial, for those who don't know, preceptorial is like an elective you get to take when you're an upperclassman at St. John's. Is a brilliant way, I think, a brilliantly simple pedagogical strategy. You give everyone the same thing to look at. That's what we do at St. John's anyways, but a little more focused manner. Give everyone the same thing to look at. And you give them the opportunity to get something, take something away for it from themselves, by giving them the time, by not overwhelming them, by making accommodations for leisurely thinking, leisurely work. An oxymoron, I know, and that's why it's so beautiful. I gotta recommend it. You should try this leisure thing, boys and girls. But I also want to say, if someone is excited, if someone wants to make big leaps, I won't fault you. I personally will always welcome it. A little passion never hurts. Everyone brings something different to a room. That's the beauty of having 10 to 20 kids in a room. You cannot have, it's not like having 3 people. The preceptorial is much smaller than other classes. It's, at St. John's, you get to have a more focused experience as a result. But if things jump around a little bit, that's okay too. Learning to accept that, I think, is another benefit. I think, or another thing, way I've grown, I believe. I think I've seen others grow in a similar fashion over the course of 4 years. Just being accepting of other people's excitement. I'm not here to critique or judge. How can I critique or judge if I only heard you speak once? I'm not the teacher, I'm a student. I can't be critical in that way. I'll be critical because I'm curious. What do you mean? What is that? What? That's interesting. Can you expand a little more? Because I'm curious, not because I want to hurt you. It's about recognition, not harming, not fixing, not repairing or reconstructing or tearing someone down and bring them back up again. Seeing someone and thinking alongside them. It could be a book, could be your friend. Doesn't matter what the object is. Could be music, could be philosophy. Doesn't matter if you're comfortable there or not. Still an object.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's nice to hear. Those were all of the main questions I really had. I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to add. I feel as though I could go on for hours, but no, this conversation I've taken away a lot, and I really do appreciate, the insight that you have. And I think a lot of people, I mean, everyone here has this unique view. But again, just thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's not often at St. John's that one is comfortable necessarily after a couple of years to just make statements and claims and say opinions like I have today. I've said a lot of opinions and I've quoted a couple people. That being said, it was a great opportunity you afforded me after I've graduated to reflect on my experiences in an organic, honest, and open manner, dude. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have been on this little talk with you. I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to say one thing. If I can say one last thing. I just want to say one thing. And I think I told this to some students before I left the delegate council too. When I graduated from the delegate council. Don't forget it's about having fun. Don't forget it's about having fun. It doesn't make any less serious of an endeavor. It doesn't. This is still school. This is still college. And, your peers and your teachers will expect from you what they think you should expect from yourself. Take from that what you will. Okay. It's about having fun. Where else can you do 4 years where you have the time to just think? You have your whole life to just think, but sometimes demands of the real world catch up with you. Funnily enough, we consider St. John's to not be aligned with reality. That's a joke. Don't repeat that. But there's something real there. There's something that very much applies to one's whole life as much as it applies to St. John's, that you had the time to think. So take it and take it well. Enjoy it and savor it. It's an aesthetic experience as much as it is a learning experience, I think.
Just
education is life, my friend.
Yeah.
According to some, it was life. Let's take that seriously for a moment. What they mean by that. How are you going to live your life? One step at a time. Doesn't matter what the object is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
No, I appreciate
I
that.
will not preach. My apologies. I should be asking questions only. Making a claim is a sin.
I've really appreciated this, and
Yeah, thank you, man.
we please stay in touch, and as we usually do. But no, this has been a great, fantastic conversation, and I think it really does shine an accurate light of what we do here, and that's all I'm really searching for. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again, man.
That's all for this episode of The College. Stay tuned for our next episode.